if the population is happy to trust Guernsey and Jersey with each other's strategic assets, then the cheapest option is to go from St Peter Port down under Cherbourg, turn left, go to Jersey Airport and then on to St Helier.
Welcome to the Bailiwick Express podcast. My name is Aaron Carpenter. Each week we will shine a light on topics from across the Bailiwick. The format will change from week to week. We'll have debates, reviews, hot seat interviews and special guests. So stick with us as we tackle some of the most important issues we face in the Bailiwick. The idea of a fixed link between Guernsey and Jersey is a matter of when, not if, according to a Guernsey actuary. Martyn Dorey says an underwater tunnel linking the islands is inevitable, and with borrowing rates low, now is the perfect time to engage a £2.6 billion project that he says could be completed in 6 years and become profitable within 30. So how would it work? What do private investors need from the Channel Island governments? And how much public money would be needed to kickstart the feasibility study? We invited Martyn to the studio to drill down into his plans. And I'm joined this morning by Martyn Dorey, investment actuary, who is the brains behind the idea for a underwater tunnel, first to Jersey and then latterly, hopefully, to France. If you could tell me, Martyn, first of all, where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so I was for a couple of years president of the Guernsey Chamber of Commerce, fantastic organisation, and a lot of the members were coming up to me and saying, Martyn, what are you going to do about connectivity? And it was like, do you mean digital connectivity or physical connectivity? And the answer was physical connectivity. How are we going to make Guernsey better connected? So we started off with a blank sheet of paper, a bit like a Richard Scarry cartoon. I don't know if you read them when you were a kid. And what are all the ways you could go from Guernsey to Jersey? You could go, for example, can you go by roller skates? No. Can you go by hang glider? Nope. Can you go by cable car? Possibly. But we worked out that you need a big mountain on Guernsey and Jersey to make that happen. So that's a no. We then looked at things like airships, and we thought, well, that's possible because they're about a tenth of the cost to run compared to a normal aircraft. But in discussions with Zeppelin NT, we worked out that actually the development cost to get them to work in inclement weather was just too much, so that's a no. We then looked at things like seaplanes, and actually, has someone got a design for an ocean-going seaplane? And the answer is yes. So we got excited by that, but then we needed £500 million to get that idea off the ground. But one of the other ideas that was kicking around to solve the connectivity problem was, in fact, obviously you can make the runway longer, you can spend more on ships, but there was this idea about having a fixed link. Could you have a bridge or a tunnel? So we researched it and we got in contact with this amazing guy called Stephen Witham at Ramboll, based in Copenhagen. And he's been super supportive and helped us with our mathematics and engineering calculations. And we've concluded that actually a tunnel that goes under the seabed. So you might look at it as being undersea, but some people think that means it lies on the seabed. But actually we've looked at lying one on the seabed, but this is actually one under the seabed. It's probably the most viable way of doing it through the sandstone and granite on the islands.
And so you really did start with an outcome that you wanted to achieve. And I think sometimes the conversation on Guernsey can be about working with our limited infrastructure, the island nature which makes it difficult for commercial levels of travel. So you really did start with the ground up.
Oh yeah, there's a particular type of thinking which is when you look at an opportunity set.
Yeah.
So quite often we start off with where we are and we generate ideas from where we are. But actually, if you want to do proper, what's called 10 times improvement in thinking, you have to go back to first principles and start again. And that means really thinking about everything. And we were really buoyed up, actually, when we looked at the work they were doing in the Faroe Islands and how they managed to connect all their islands together in the Faroe Islands with these undersea tunnels. And we asked the question, actually, would that work in Guernsey and Jersey? And no one can say definitely yes, but at the moment the indications are yes.
And how did that work from an investor's perspective in the Faroe Islands?
Yeah, so there was about 3 steps that happened. One is they'd started burrowing through their mountains on land. Then they started doing quite small undersea tunnels, which proved to be very, very successful. And then they got thinking, can we build longer undersea tunnels? And there's one project which has just been completed, which I think is the perfect proxy for us. What they did is a municipal government said, we're going to do a little study. It cost them, I think, about £1 million, and they said, can we, build a tunnel to join these two places together? And said, well, look, we think so, yes. Then they got more interest from the sort of the central government of the Faroe Islands, and they said, yeah, okay, in that case, let's move this forward. And the first thing they did was they set up a tunnel corporation. This was like a development corporation, but specifically around a tunnel. Yeah. Then they gave it seed funding, and the first thing they did was they put the laws in place and the legal structures to support the development of a tunnel joining these two islands together. Then they put some funding, which formed, if you like, the capital of the tunnel corporation. And then they conducted the feasibility studies. And the feasibility studies said, okay, you could do it this way, but not that way. Great. We found a way we can build the tunnel. And then they went to the private sector and they said, raise us the money as cheaply as you can to build this project. Yeah. And the private sector came up with between 90 and 95% of the cash to actually build the project. In fact, it was finished in December and it's now open to business.
So that's how you would envision it working in the Channel Islands as well?
Yeah, I mean, remember, there's many ways of getting there, but we've spoken to a number of private sector funders, and they said, look, we're super happy to support the project, but we need some commitments from government. Then we can, then we can make anything happen.
Yeah.
My concern, which will be the same for both the population of Guernsey and Jersey, is to make sure that everyone gets value for money and that we're not locked into some long-term, for example, if you work with other parts of the world, I'm not naming any countries in particular, who do a lot of infrastructure support around the globe, there's often strings attached. We don't want strings attached.
No.
We just want to work with the highest levels of trust, and we do need to be working with people who we as a population trust to make the tunnel happen.
So what do you need from the island's respective governments to make this feasible? And to get investors on board.
Yeah, to get investors on board. So one of the things the Faroe government did is, look, we're not going to guarantee cash amounts, but what we will guarantee is passenger numbers. And in fact, one of the things Ramboll got involved with was actually modelling the passenger numbers for the Faroe tunnels. So, I mean, you could go down the passenger route, but you could also go down the financial guarantee route, and then the money will be forthcoming. But I would rather see Guernsey and Jersey say, look, we're happy to engage with this project. We'll put a team of resources together. We'll put a tunnel corporation in place. I think we could get there if we had match funding for the feasibility study. So if you said Guernsey and Jersey put like £1 each in the pot, and the private sector put £2 in the pot, I think we'd probably get there. Yeah. I think that would do it.
And the scale is something that we're perhaps not familiar with. So what do you think a feasibility study would cost?
I think the feasibility study will cost anywhere between 5 and 10 million, in all honesty. But that will create a stack of paper, which is then sufficient to make the rest of the project happen. There's a lot of questions. For example, what do the islands want? What would best meet our needs? And that's a public engagement exercise. Some things are very, very important to the populations on Guernsey and Jersey, and some things aren't. We have to figure out actually what those key things are, and actually where that intersects with commercial viability.
Yeah, because transport connectivity has been on the radar, some might say the back burner, for a number of years now. How do you think the states of Guernsey in particular backing this project, or at least putting some weight and seriousness behind it, would impact Aurigny potentially with the Jersey route?
Yeah. So, for a lot of people in Guernsey, an airport is part of our sovereign assets. And losing an airport is super important to them. So, we've come up with this and say, look, we're assuming that the airport in Guernsey will be there. We're going to assume that the port in Jersey will be there. But I would imagine if the islands can develop trust with each other and that they have been able to work through all the wrinkles, I think there would be economies of scale from sharing ports and airports. I mean, Guernsey's got a fantastic deep water port, and I think if we could share an airport, we'd have more passengers going on that airport than you would find, for example, in Southampton. And Southampton has weekly flights to America. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had weekly flights to New York from a shared Channel Islands airport? Now, you're not going to have that with each airport individually, but put them together, you've got regular flights to Europe. But also, the game actually isn't shared airports or shared ports. The game really is to get people moving between the islands quickly and efficiently. And over the long term, you tend to find half of a population commutes into work. Half of people who work in London actually commuted there. Same in Bristol. The same in Paris. Look all the way around the world. Generally, people commute to work, and we get massive productivity gains just from people zipping in from St Helier to St Peter Port backwards and forwards. Think about it in terms of hospitals as well. We've got 2 great hospitals in Guernsey and Jersey, but actually, if you had the keep the A&E where they are, but had specialised operations happening in Guernsey and Jersey, we could do much more stuff actually on island.
So the Guernsey-Jersey link is clearly important. Would that work without France being involved?
As far as I can tell, if it's just Guernsey and Jersey, we would need obviously support from the Crown because it involves the seabed, but there will almost certainly be some discussions with the French as well. We'd like really to go on to France ultimately. I mean, the mass is pointing us very much into the Cotentin Peninsula, into Coutances. That looks like it would be the entry port into France. But I think realistically, we should be able to do Guernsey and Jersey without having difficult politics. We just need to want it. And it is a large amount of money. We think it might cost about, if you like, I'm saying 2.6 billion, but the thing is costs are coming down. And in fact, the cost could be a lot less than that. They might be a little bit more, but it's, we may find, for example, that using modern mining techniques, there's lots of tunnel boring machines currently coming off the research and development arms of factories, which are, for example, if you wanted to dig the tunnel between Guernsey and Jersey using current technology, it would take about 2 years to dig and 1 year to fit out. Some of the tunnel boring machines, for example, that Elon Musk has got in his factory is reportedly digging at 10 times that rate. So you could be talking 6 months to dig a tunnel. Now, we don't know how much of that is fact and fiction, but we know for a fact that using current technology, using what we know about the sandstone between the islands and the granite on the islands, that would be about 2 years to dig the whole thing and 1 year to fit out. And the costs, plan for 2.6 billion, but what we really want to do is get it much less than that.
There's going to be a massive public interest as we discuss these plans further. Is it important to get that exposure to kind of break the taboo almost around speaking about projects of this scale? Because Guernsey isn't necessarily renowned for kind of culture defining revolutionary projects.
Well, that's become what people say today. And I said to you, look, if I was going to dig a whole bunch of holes in our granite, let's call it the quarrying industry, you'll find these massive holes throughout the channel lines. And I'd say it's actually equivalent to restarting the quarrying industry. I mean, that's the best analogy. And if you looked at the volume of dirt that's being dug out of Guernsey, there's probably more than is required to dig a tunnel from... and I include Alderney in that as well, because there's been lots of quarrying there. The way to think about it is, one is that borrowing rates are very, very cheap, particularly if you link it to inflation. And we think it's actually an ideal time to get funding to build the tunnel right now, because the cost of money is very, very cheap. And in fact, we could do it cheaper than they built their tunnels in the Faroe Islands. And we've got well over double the GDP, the Faroe Islands, and much more than double the combined population of Guernsey and Jersey is about 180,000. We think the key numbers are to try and get a £15 journey to Jersey, ideally down to £11. And I think if we're talking about that price point, it will be very successful. But the key thing that's going to bring the cost down is the use of trains rather than having a car tunnel. It's actually not physically, financially, it's nowhere going to be near in scope to have a car tunnel, because you need to control traffic on Guernsey and Jersey. There would be actually quite a lot of volume. You'd need sort of 2 lanes of traffic
Yeah.
on either side, and the width of the tunnel would need to be huge. The costs go up, not double, not as a square, but actually as a cube. And that means it's just not going to be viable. We've got to have a very smart train, and one of the great pieces of technology that's happened recently is this thing called a bridging train. It's a battery-powered train. For any sort of geeks listening, go look up the Talent 3 Bombardier train. It's a bridging train. It's got a pack of batteries on board, and that will do. They supply them. We've spoken to Bombardier. They supply them in sort of 120 mile an hour variants. So you can have a battery-powered train. It'll do the distance in 15 minutes, and that's one example. And there are many out there. No. In our calculations of 2.6 billion, we've actually assumed the track will be electrified. So you can knock, you can knock money off the electrification of the track, which again, there are all these technological developments which are just bringing the cost down.
And these are the kind of issues that you would flesh out through a feasibility study.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
And then you could draw up all of the kind of like-for-like comparisons between different models, different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And that would help achieve your, if you don't mind calling it this, tunnel vision.
Yeah. There are many ways of doing this, and for those people who are concerned about strategic assets and sovereignty, those people will only be satisfied by having a shared, if you like, island built from the spoil. If the population is happy to trust Guernsey and Jersey with each other's strategic assets, then the cheapest option is to go from St Peter Port down under Cherbourg, turn left, go to Jersey Airport, and then on to St Helier. And that would mean effectively 10 minutes from St Peter Port to Jersey Airport.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that. So what would this look like? What's the customer experience?
Okay, so the first thing, if we're going to go 10 years in the future, you've got to forget everything that we know about transport today. That's because when you're planning for big infrastructure projects, you don't build it around how we do things today. You've got to build it around how people are going to be doing things in 10 years' time. It's very likely, and this is how it's priced into the market, that we will have driverless cars in 5 years' time. Very, very likely. It's, people are in their testing phases of the technology, and they've been testing it for about 5 years. And we think that the first person to market with a driverless car will probably wipe the floor clean. And at the moment it looks like it's going to be Tesla, but it could easily be Volkswagen.
And critical mass will be important, won't it? Because you'll need a certain number of passengers to make it commercially viable, to start getting a return on investment.
Absolutely right. The first thing is demand. How many people will want to use the tunnel? All the evidence that we've looked at so far is that speed is the biggest determinant of demand. And in the Faroe Islands, everywhere that they've replaced a ferry service with a car journey, they've had a tenfold uplift in people using that journey, and then about 7% increase thereafter. So if you just looked at that model, you'll look at it'll go from 500 people travelling between the islands a day to 5,000, and then 7% growth thereafter. So that's the sort of the basic model. The other way you can look at it is how many people travel in and out of St Peter Port on a road. If you like, a minor road into St Peter Port probably has about 12,000 movements a day. A big road like Glastonbury Esplanade probably has about 24,000 movements a day. It's likely that you will see that level of movements long term on a critical piece of infrastructure like a train. I would also point out that if every tourist coming into Guernsey and Jersey used the train, you'll get 3,000 movements just from that. But I do think the critical number to make the thing work is probably going to be around the 3,000 movements a day level. At that point it's washing its face. Once you get to 5,000 movements, it's actually paying down capital. And the key thing's speed. If it's quick and it's convenient, you can expect the numbers to go up. And obviously if you can develop a working population that's commuting, you've got somewhere in the region of, let's say, 50 to 60,000 people. You could be looking at half of those people actually using the train every day. But that's not going to be, that won't be for 10 years.
What is the next step for this for you? You've mentioned government. You mentioned that you need both governments to take this seriously. What needs to happen now, and what is your engagement with the government's been like today?
So, I mean, there's sort of a, if you like, a sort of a private part to that, which is, we are reaching out to government in Guernsey and reaching out to governments in Jersey, and we're hopeful that will generate some interest from both governments.
And what's the nature of what you're looking for? Is it a commitment to explore it, or to directly fund a feasibility study, or part fund a feasibility study? What is it that you you need
Yeah.
from governments?
So what we need is for government to allocate resource to support the project. That will mean a person with a role and a mandate supported by government, supported by law to take the investigations forward. And the important thing is that you can pull out at any moment. It looks like it's not going to work. The last thing you want to do is actually fully commit yourself to something and you think, actually, no, this is a deal breaker. However, bizarrely, everything we've looked at looks like we've got perfect tunnelling ground, both in terms of the hard rock on the islands, which is super cheap. Actually, it's the cheapest to dig is the hard rock on Guernsey and Jersey. The expensive bit is the sandstone between the islands, which will probably require a tunnel boring machine. But if we're very lucky, we might find that we could mine it, and then it's happy days.
And you've mentioned before, and I'll probably end on this, that speed with the tunnel, with the train itself, is important. Is speed also important as you kind of look to seize the opportunities kind of post-pandemic and get the ball rolling on this?
I think speed is important, and it's part of momentum. Remember, we've had a lot of support from the private sector in sort of northwestern Europe, and if you're going to have, you've only got one shot at talking to people, and they'll say, "Are you serious about this or not?" And unfortunately, if we don't have the support of governments, plural, we won't have any credibility, and we've lost the opportunity. And perhaps it'll take someone in 10 years' time to have another go at this, but I'm afraid it is inevitable that there will be a fixed link between Guernsey and Jersey, just because the costs are coming down. The question actually isn't if it can be done. It's actually, I think, a question of when it can be done. And there will be a window when we've got the resources to make it happen, as GDP of Guernsey and Jersey put together. Or there'll be a point where actually perhaps we've not managed our economies. We've allowed GDP to shrink. We've allowed the workforce to shrink. And then it won't be possible to financially support it. In which case you'll need the cost of tunnelling to come down quite a lot. And then it could be a long time till it can happen. So I think it's inevitable there will be a tunnel, but there's things that might make it happen earlier, might make it happen later. But tunnelling's happening all the way around the world. There's much longer projects than this one. And we need to be part of that story. We need to use it as an economic enabler. I mean, we think you'd probably get about 10% GDP growth a year for at least 10 years. And I don't know of any other economic plan on the table that will deliver that. And obviously, if we can go on to France, you can then start cranking that up beyond 10% per annum.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time, Martyn. Thank you for coming to speak to us this morning.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for listening to the Bailiwick Express podcast. The title track was Shift My Weight by Luno. If you enjoyed it, please like and share. You can find us online, on social, on email and internet radio. There'll be more from me, Aaron Carpenter, and the rest of the Bailiwick Express news team next week.